Okay, it's time, so let's get started. So, any question from last time? If not, this time we start to talk about this concept of reduced density matrix. And, wait, excuse me, how do I? And, hello? Like this. Okay. Hello? And, wait, excuse me. Hello. Why is this weird? Like this. I guess I will just speak louder. Anyway, this reduced density matrix, this is a concept of, projector, excuse me. I forgot to connect here. Okay. Should be fine now. Okay. Let's get back to the class. So we talk about reduced density matrix, and this is a concept where we have two systems that are interacting, and they might have some entangled state rho AB, and but we just want to look at the A part. If we just want to look at the A part, like what measurement and what unitary you can apply on it, and then it can be totally described by this reduced density matrix rho A, which is which can be calculated. So rho A can be calculated from doing trace B on rho AB, and this trace B is called partial trace. And this partial trace operation, well, we have a definition here. This very axiomatic definition where define is action on computational basis. And we said then for everything else, you just do linear extension. And a more intuitive way to see this is that when you do partial trace B on some state that's rho tensor sigma, then the result is a state is a density matrix on just system A, so this rho, and then you times the number which is the trace of the sigma. And if the sigma is also a density matrix which has trace 1, then this partial trace will just become rho. And we give some example of where your rho AB is this pure and entangled state. This maximally entangled pair, this EPR pair beta 00, and we see that the reduced density matrix on A part will be the totally mixed state, 1/2 times identity, or 1/2 0 0 plus 1 1. 1/2 projector on 0 plus projector on 1. So that's a partial trace. Then we say the partial trace describe everything you can do on system A, and here we give physically motivated proof. So this is not quite rigorous, but it's quite intuitive. So the proof here we do is we consider the two systems has some global density matrix rho AB, and we just use physical principle that these two systems can be really far apart. So anything you do on system B should not affect system A because of no signaling. So we think what happens if we just measure system B in computational basis? When we do that, A will collapse into something, and now we calculate the measurement here. So we do computational basis measurement on system B, and the corresponding measurement operator are obviously the projectors onto the computational basis states, those II, and but that's on system B. So what's the measurement operator on the whole system? Well, that should be doing identity on system A and tensor with those projectors on system B. Okay? And so those are the measurement operators. And we want to find the ensemble interpretation. So we do this measurement on system B, and we want to see what are the post-measurement states, the probabilities, and the corresponding post-measurement state of the whole system after you do this. So we do the calculation. And the whole system is in some state rho AB, as we said. And first we calculate the subnormalized state. So we want to find M rho AB, M dagger, and that's just written out like this. And the subnormalized state should be equal to the probability times the normalized state. And so that's that. Then we do operation or manipulation that looks kind of illegal but is correct. That is, we separate those brackets here. And so we want to separate this thing into what is the state on B and what is the state on A. So we kind of do a very weird separation here. This is abusing the bracket notation. So we have this I tensor. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. Okay. So we look at this and we think system B should become this I cat times I bra. Okay. So this goes to here and this goes to here. And we think the other thing will multiply with this rho AB. So the other thing will sandwich this rho AB. Okay? So we separate this projector II into broad and cat very delicately. Okay? And anyway, and this is correct correct formula because this part is now a density matrix on system A, and this part is a density matrix on system B because so this is a way you get a density matrix on system AB to a density matrix on A only because you sandwich out the B part, right? So remember, if you take some just some matrix, this is like on some matrix rho B, and you sandwich it with some row vector and some column vector, and it will become a number. So when you sandwich your row AB with this identity tensor I, and identity tensor I bra, and identity tensor I cat, the B part will just get calculate that this sandwiching of matrix with row vector and the column vector, so the B part just become number, so this becomes just a matrix on the system A. Okay. So that's the tricky step of this calculation, where you separate this Brad and Kate into something that will kill the B part here and something left over on the B part. And anyway, now this thing has a nice structure that this part is on system A, so L of HA, and this part is on, that's too much word. So this part is on system A, and this part is on system B. And so now we see the subnormalized state on system A is just this thing. And and we want to find the whole density matrix because system A don't know the measurement outcome. Then that should be sum over all those subnormal states. So just sum over I, all these things. And now you see that this is just the formula of doing trace on the B part. Just do a partial trace on B. I guess we didn't prove that this is equivalent to partial trace, but that's also true. Okay. So any question about this a bit sketchy derivation? And and if you want to see a more rigorous derivation, you can look up the textbook Neo Central. And okay, so if there's no question, let's go to the next topic. So this is the thing we kind of talked about. We say in our reduced density matrix of Bell state example, we say this is an entangled state here, and that's why you get your reduced density matrix being a mixed state. Okay, and now we'll make this a bit more rigorous by talking about streaming decomposition and purification. And those are two operations that talks about how a pure state on system AB is related to the reduced density matrix rho A and rho B. They are good characterization. So let's first talk about this streaming decomposition. And this is really a canonical form of any entangled pure state. So it needs to be pure. So that's some restriction. But when your state on both system A and system B, the psi AB is a pure state, then there is a really good description on it that describes the entanglement between system A and system B. So the statement is that if psi AB is a pure state on AB, then there exists an orthonormal set of states, this IA, and another orthonormal set of state IB, such that your psi AB can be written as summation for I, some lambda I, some lambda I which are positive numbers, and IA tensor IB. And the important thing here is that this summation I are the same over all three registers. So we are just summing over one I. and that's different from what you usually write for for entangled state, right? Because entangled state, let's say both system A and system B are d-dimensional, then usually you will write your state like this, right? You remember the computational basis state for the whole entangled, for the whole composite space is whatever computational state here, computational state here. So there are d possibility here, d possibility here. So there are d squared coefficients to describe an entangled state. But here you just see d coefficients, right? Because there is only sum over 1i here, and those I and AIB are orthogonal to each other. Sorry, this IA is an orthogonal set. So at most there are DIA here. So this summation here is at most D, and those lambda I, there are at most D of them. So instead of D squared coefficients, you just have D coefficient here. But obviously those I and IB depend on psi. But so you are not really losing information. There are still like D squared information here, but those lambda I are the only part that matters for thinking about entanglement between system A and system B, because you look at this looks like a linear superposition of pure states, right? Because for every I and IB is IA tensor IB, so this is like a pure state. And I guess the state that's already written in streaming decomposition is like our favorite Bill state. So gives me the Bill state is 1 over square root 2, 0, 0 plus 1, 1. Right? So for example, our Bill state beta 0, 0 is 1 over square root 2, 0, 0 plus 1, 1. So it's extremely decomposition where your 1A and 1B is just 0 and 0, and your 2A and 2B is just 1, 1. And lambda 1 is 1 over square root 2, lambda 2 is 1 over square root 2. Okay. So, well, when we do the streaming decomposition, we are trying to write states in this form. And those lambda I are called streaming coefficients. And they satisfy all those lambda I are greater or equal to 0, and the square sum to 1. And the square sum to 1 really comes from the normalization. And they are all greater or equal to 0 just basically for our convenience, because we have freedom to choose this IA and IB. So if this lambda I has any phase, you can just absorb them into the definition of IA. Okay, so that's streaming decomposition. Let's go over the proof. So the proof is quite short. If we know a little more about linear algebra. So the proof starts with just write down notations. So let's express our arbitrary psi AB in terms of this most general form of psi AB. So you just sum over computational basis states J and K, and there are some coefficient A, J, K. And then what we do is this linear algebra operation, which is called singular value decomposition on A. So we think this AJK as the matrix element of some matrix A. And we do singular value decomposition on A. And for those of you who don't know about singular value decomposition, it is like diagonalization but more general, because any matrix can be decomposed by singular value decomposition, but you also get more freedom here. So it's like diagonalization, where you write your matrix A into something times diagonal matrix times something, so or unitary times diagonal matrix that is unitary. Yeah. So difference from diagonalization or unitary diagonalization. So in unitary diagonalization, we say A equal to U du dagger. So singular value decomposition is easier because this U and the V can be different matrix. Yeah. So this is more powerful because even a non-square matrix can be written as singular value decomposition. And you can look up linear algebra textbook or Wikipedia to see how this is done. This is possible for any matrix. And also because you have lots of freedom in this U and the V, you can assume your D is diagonal and positive. Okay. Because for any phase, extra phase, you can just absorb them into U and the V. So let's just assume this is possible. Then we can write this AJK as elements of this U times D times V, which is sum over sum I, because D is just some diagonal matrix, so you only need to care about DII. So you have AJK can be written as summation over I, UJI, DII, VIK. This is just standard way to write matrix multiplication in terms of elements. Okay. And usually we need to write DII prime, but D is diagonal, so we only care about DII. Okay. And there's J and there's K. And the next step, we just basically regroup the summations. So we group this UJI and JK and VKK and KK together, and let's call an another vector. So let's define IA just as summation over OJ, and that's the only thing dependent on J is UJI times KJ. And similarly, IB defined by summation K, UIK, OK. And obviously, so this notation makes sense because now every dependence on J is summed over. This is just some function of I. And this is also sum over everything dependent on K. This is just also a function of I. And this DI also only depends on I, and let's just define that as lambda I. Okay. So now we already have this form. So psi is summation I lambda I tensor IB. And the last thing we need to prove is, well, we say those IA, set of all IA and set of all IB are set of orthonormal states. And that just really come from this U. Oh, sorry, I have this should be V. Okay. This just really come from U and V are unitary matrices. And we don't go over the detail, but you can easily verify because U and V are unitary. So when you define this I and IB, you are basically doing a change of basis from those computational bases and doing a rotation by U and a rotation by B. And you do a unitary rotation on a computational basis. You also get the orthonormal basis. Yeah. And so that's complete the proof. I and IB are orthonormal basis because U and V are unitary matrices, and this definition are just a rotation. Okay. So this proves that you take any entangled pure state on two systems, then you can write it as this streaming decomposition, where you only have the streaming coefficients that signals how entangled your states are. So, yeah, as we said, we want to write a state into streaming decomposition because it's a good way to check whether a state is entangled. Right? Because so for example, if you just write anything, your state in computational basis, then it's not easy to see whether it is entangled. Say this plus state tensor plus state. If you write this in computational basis, then it's going to be sum over O. It's going to be 1 over 2 and sum over O computational basis. So 0, 0 plus 0, 1 plus 1, 0 plus 1, 1. And it has every coefficient, and it's not easy to see it is something tensor something. Although, yeah. But if you write things in streaming decomposition, then it's very easy to see whether things are entangled, because every pure state will have their streaming decomposition being 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Oh, sorry, not a pure state, any product state. Okay. So non-entangled state. Because non-entangled state is just 1 and something tensor something. Okay. So I guess this is not quite complete proof, but you should do this in homework. So this if one way is really easy to see. So if your streaming coefficients are 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, then obviously your state is a product state because this formula is already a product state formula. But then the only part you need to prove. So basically you need to prove that this coefficients is unique. Okay. Okay. So we didn't quite say. Okay, we didn't prove that, but so I should say here that this is a canonical form, and actually, so we say we can find one form that looks like this, but actually, okay, this is okay. Sometimes the vectors are not unique. Wait, let me see. Excuse me, let me think of it. No, I think this is just unique. Okay, yeah. And we didn't prove this, but how do I prove this? Stream it. We didn't prove this, but this decomposition is unique. Is also unique. So it exists and it is unique. And if we have this property, then we also see the only part. Okay. And let's go back here. So some notations we have. These I and IB are called streaming bases of entangled state, and this really makes sense because this is unique. It is a unique basis correspond to your state psi AB, and those lambda I are called streaming coefficients. And the whole set of them are called streaming numbers. I think the coefficient and number are probably a little interchangeable. But anyway, and as we said, those streaming coefficients will characterize the entanglement of your composite pure state. And there is a more there are more how should I say more quantitative definition about how you calculate the amount of entanglement from the streaming coefficients, but here we just have a very qualitative description where you kind of feel that if those numbers are more spread out or even out, then your state is more entangled. So for example, here our beta 00 has the coefficient 1 over square root 2, 1 over square root 2. And that's the most spread out possible way you can have for two numbers. And that's the maximally entangled state. And on the other hand, on our pure state example, your streaming coefficient. Oh, sorry. Okay, I remember this streaming number. Okay, so this streaming coefficient for your product state is concentrated on just one of them. So it's 1000, and this is the most non-entangled state. And okay, so this is a little confusing here. So there is coefficients, which are just these numbers, and there is another concept called streaming number, which is just the number of non-zero streaming coefficients. Okay. And that's a quantitative way to calculate entanglement, although it's very non-robust, so it's a little bit, but it's some way to characterize. So for example, for this pure state, only one of them is non-zero, so streaming number is 1. Okay. And for our EPR pair, the streaming number is where is 1 square root 2 and another square root 2, the streaming number is 2. And obviously, if the system A is d-dimensional and the system B is d-dimensional, the maximum streaming number is d. So streaming number can be something from 1 to d. Okay. But it's quite not robust because it only counts the non-zero number. So it doesn't distinguish. So streaming number of 1 over square root 2, 1 over square root 2 is 2, but also like a 0.99999 and a 0.00001 is square root of this is also 2, and yeah, so you can see that it's not very robust, but it's some way to characterize entanglement. And that number is called streaming number. Any question? So that's streaming decomposition, and another thing. So the thing we just said. First the set of IA and the set of IB are a set of orthonormal states, and I refrain from calling it basis because it might not be a complete basis of everything HA. So the number of them is less than the dimension of A and less than the dimension of B. Yeah. And anyway, the number of IA will be equal to number of IB, obviously, and also equal to number of lambda I. And the 3 number is the number of non-zero terms here, and so it's at most the dimension of HA or the dimension of HB, so the minimum of them. Okay. So that's something characterizing entanglement. And okay, then let's talk about reverse operation of partial trace and really related to the streaming decomposition, which is called purification. We'll have to, okay. So the purification is really the reverse of partial trace. So you think about, you have a system A, and you have some density matrix rho A on it. Then you want to find a pure state on system A and another reference system R, such that if you do partial trace on this state psi AR, then you will get rho A. Okay. So yeah, you can see this is a reverse operation of partial trace. You want to find some psi AR that you partial trace on R, and you will get rho A. And I guess the hard part here is psi AR need to be pure. So this is like a reverse of partial trace, but also kind of like a reverse of streaming decomposition. You will see soon. Because I guess if you just want the mixed state that partial trace to rho A, then you can always just write like rho A tensor rho R, rho A tensor whatever rho R, and that will partial trace to rho A, but that's pretty stupid, and that's not what we do. We want to find a pure state that will trace into this mixed state. And so that requires some calculation. And the first thing to note about this is, I guess this is a confusion point, is that this is only a mathematical procedure. So this find here is some calculation. You want to calculate something that will satisfy this. But you have a physical system that's in some rho A, then it's not quite possible to do another physical operation to make it into a pure state. So this is oftentimes this is just mathematical, but this is still a useful thing to learn, because this will simplify a lot of proof. Mostly because, well, instead of this density matrix, now you have this pure state, and pure states are usually much easier to do calculation on. And I guess a kind of confusing example is purification justifies streaming decomposition, because if your state you have some rho AB that's not a pure state on AB, then you can also always purify it to some psi ABR that's a pure state. Okay. So that's a bit of confusion point, but that is a thing people doing quantum information theory will do. So yeah, and you want to do this mathematical procedure because pure state are easier to manipulate. Also, when you study more quantum information theory, pure state have more nice properties that you can calculate on. And the small point here, we call it R because it's a reference system. And as we said, because this purification is always possible, so we can kind of think everything as a pure state. Just you can think everything as a pure state on a larger system, and you are just doing manipulation on a small part, kind of. And yeah, and the theorem here, I kind of already said this, is that every density matrix rho can be purified. So you can always find psi AR that tracing into rho A, a pure state psi AR tracing into rho A. And the proof is quite short. So you take your density matrix rho A and you can diagonalize into some eigenvalue and projector gen onto eigenstates. And the eigenvalues are also probabilities because we have proved that the eigenvalues sum into 1 and have are positive. And then we can immediately write down a construction for your purification psi AR. That is just summation I and with coefficient square root of this pi, and on system A is IA, and on system B tensor with some IR. And this IR is really arbitrary. IR just need to be some orthonormal set. Okay. So this is all construction, but we are doing a proof, so we need to prove that this construction actually works. So let's see if we do partial trace on this side, it actually gives back rho A. So we'll partial trace R psi AR like this, and then we write out the density matrix correspond to psi AR. So that's some ij and the square root pi pj, and ia ir and ja jr. And we'll partial trace here. So we want to partial trace this IR and JR. And that's once again use cyclic property of trace. So this is really the inner product with J and R. So that's just delta Ij. And you sum over J is delta Ij, just change every J into I. So this is really just some I, Pi, Ia, Ia. And this is exactly the rho A we start with. Okay. So we prove that we can purify any state rho A, density matrix rho A, into entangled pure state of this form. Summation I, square root pi, ia, tensor ir. And you can see that we have some freedom here because this ir only need to be orthonormal set. And you can rotate it a little bit and it's still orthonormal set. And it will still be a purification of rho A. So in general, this purification is not one-to-one precision. So there are many things that is a purification of your density matrix. Or in other words, the partial trace is a many-to-one map. So partial trace is a function, but you can probably see here many things will partial trace into the same thing. Okay. So that's something to, actually, never mind. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's something to remember. Partial trace is many-to-one mapping, and when you do the reverse, there are inverse of this many-to-one mapping. There are many solutions, but just having one of them is pretty cool. Yeah. You only need to know the purification exists, and you can kind of think everything as a pure state on a bigger space. So pure state on a bigger space. Any question about purification? When we do the calculation. So a small summary. When you do purification, you diagonalize your matrix, and when you try to find streaming decomposition, you do singular value decomposition on your coefficients. And well, here you already kind of see the correlation between streaming decomposition and the purification, because what we write down here, this purified state, this is already in streaming decomposition, right? This is, well, yeah, it's in the streaming decomposition form. Some over some positive number, and some also known basis on A, and some also known basis on R. And we can summarize this a little more generally. So in this class, we have talked about a relationship between entangled pure state on two system AR, and maybe mixed density matrix on row A. So when you want to go from this entangled pure state to your density matrix, what you do is this partial trace operation on your HR system R. And if you want to go from a density matrix on row A to find the corresponding entangled pure state, what you do is purification. And here you can see the streaming decomposition being useful, more useful. So if you write your entangled pure state in terms of streaming decomposition, you will look like this. Your psi AR is sum over I pi square root pi I tensor IR. And you can also write your density matrix in terms of its eigenstates, and you will be summation I pi I Kate I m bra. And there are correspondence between the square root pi here and those pi here, and those and those square root pi, well, because the square root pi is really the square root of those pi here, as you see from this proof of purification. On this side, those square root pi are called streaming coefficients, and those pi's are eigenvectors of row A. And you can also interpret this as the ensemble interpretation, and those pi will be the probability of your state being this eigenstate IA. And also, finally, we see this correspondence between being entangled here and being a pure state here. So when your pure state on AB has streaming coefficient 1,0,0,0,0, then the state here is a product state. and that will correspond to your density matrix as those pi also being 1 0 0 0 and it's a pure state. And you can also see when it's not equal to 1 0 0 0, then it will not equal to 1 0 0 0, and this side will be an entangled state, and this side will be a mixed state. So this is entangled, and this will be mixed. Okay, any question? If not, let's have a break.
我其实看到那个之前在算那个 reduce 跟这个 operator 的时候，我对这个符号就是 trace， 然后有一个问题是，假设我只知道说可能row A B 好了，然后等于某一个 matrix 这样子，然后题目就是假设有个题目直接叫我算 trace B of row A B， 那这是可以算的吗？因为我不是很清楚，因为我们也能讲G，就是 trace 这个地方的和。但是如果我们要讲 trace B 的话，那我们的数值上应该是怎么讲？
应该是对 B 的部分做 trace。
对 B 的部分对的。
可是如果我们知道它的 row A B 是长这个样子，就一个 matrix 你看，那我们要怎么知道哪一个是 B 的部分？
首先这个是可以看的吧，然后先讲最暴力方法就是你可以把这个东西写成。你可以把你的 matrix 写成这个我们一开始的那个形式嘛，就是如果从定义来直接讲的话，在哪里？
系数，然后
对吧？你可以把它写成那堆系数。
你会假设它是4个元素对4个元素这样，然后就可能这个
也不是吧
4块这样，
就切成4块，然后
是的。
这样怎么讲？
在哪里？
这帮它
找不到。
就例如说可能是 row A， 然后这是 row B。然后前4块，所以就是这边
这样。然后可能这 A B C D 这样，然后可能就 A 大 B B 大 B C 大 B。
所以这样是可以的。
可是这样确实要怎么算？
等一下我找一下，我找不到。Partial trace， 所以你总是可以写成，我可以找到了。你总是可以写成这种东西吗？你可以。就是这里会有很多 coefficient， 所以你的 row A B 可以写成像现在有很多东西的 A B C D 的感觉嘛，然后可能要大小 A 好了，不对，你用过小 A， 就用 row 吧 ，row sub A B C D， 然后这样子 A B。CD 嘛，对吧？然后，那你 trace， 那你这样 trace B 的时候，你就会 sum over 这些东西嘛。那你这里 trace B， 然后照我们说的，你就会直接 linear 下来，就变成 trace B 这个东西。对，然后就会是 sum A B C D 啊，慢慢记好。虽然我直接跳几步吧 ，C， 然后row A B C C 这样子嘛，因为这个时候在 C 等于 D 的时候才不是零，就是你只会 pick 到 C 等于 D 的，所以你就 D 的就消失了，就直接上 A B C， 然后 A B C C 这样。然后要看图的话，要看这个的话，其实也是可以吧。就是我想一下，我们的 notation 的话，就是 row A B， 你可以把它分成4块。其实图上是可以看出来的。row A B 你会有，这个有点像是 A1的，是这样吗？应该是。
对，然后。A 1 2 B， 然后
A 1 2 B，
A 应该都是 B 吧？
我这好像不需要写 A1，等一下我查一下，这样讲吧。其实会变成，如果我没记错的话，有点烦就是这里叫 B， 应该都这样子 B1 B2。就切成4块嘛，然后，那其实你 trace B 之后，会发生的事情就是你变成一个 trace B， 然后这是个数字嘛？这是假设 A 的只有一个 bit 啦，所以它会切成4块，然后这里 trace B1，trace B21。应该就是这样子而已，所以就是这两个数字加起来，这两个数字加起来，这两个数字加起来，这两个数字加起来。
笑死。
然后，那你可以再想的话，trace A 的话，应该要加哪些数字起来？
可是如果作业有问题，可以找。
作业有问题可以问我。改的话，最好问他比较好吧。
我觉得这两个应该是一样。
这是什么问题？也忘记。
那个是那个什么V 内积是个暴力测量，暴力 measurement。
暴力 measurement。我靠。可能问。就是那个对，这是 poly 的 poly measurement Vita sigma 长这样，然后算出来的东西不对吗？
其实是一样的，可是助教解答给这个，那这个应该是可以变成这样。
有可能，那你要去跟他熬一下。
就是 post measurement，你可以直接带那个矩阵，然后去把它算出来，也可以直接就拿那个 basis 出来。
那你就跟助教讲一下吧。对，
就即兴。
如果即兴，或是等他回来问他一下。
他什么时候？
他应该1-2礼拜回来把他出国去。我觉得下个礼拜应该就要回来了。对。
我刚刚那个是两百。
结果这个东西
刚刚不是说那个可以那个 I 什么的？
这个不懂。OK。这个是说，那个是有点乱七八糟的，所以我们有 I 乘以然后ρ为 B， 要不然我再把它弄得再诡异一点好了，这瞎搞的事情。假设这里是 A， 就用 A 好了 ，matrix。这个是1。对啊，只是把它分开成这样看乱玩，写出来就A1，这个还好，我觉得 IJK 的话，
把这个写下来，
没有，ρ没有变，ρ还是留在这里。但是我想要把这里的 A part， 我想把这个结果的 A part 跟 B part 分开来。对，我想把这个的前面跟后面分开来。然后做很奇怪的事情，是我把这里切开来，因为我知道这个打下去，它的 B part 的最后剩下一定是这个 I 嘛，因为它的 B part 的就是这个，这些比较分清楚啊，然后这里 I 对。 我知道在 B part 他做的事情不是可觉很矮嘛，在 B part 的东西，所以我做的是很奇怪的把这里split开来的事情，就看起来不太对，但是可以对的事情。所以我把这里的这个 I 跟错，这个 I 跟这个 J 先拿出来，变成它在 B part 的它 B part 一定要剩下这东西嘛，然后剩下的东西再去乘起来。A1 cancel I， 然后这样就会 B。然后这里有 A2 cancel， 所以 OK， 所以这个是一个在我会学的东西。然后这里有 cancel， 然后这个是那个在 B 趴的东西。这里做的是很奇怪的事情，就是这个是在 B part 的东西，但是因为我把 B part 用这个 IJ 加起来了，所以 B part 就消失变成数字，然后是 A part。
那如果我把它拆开两个在一起，
也会对啊，对吧？你可以写一个。昨天在罗比的话，就会后面就会弄。对啊对啊。但他不见得这样，主要这个其实证明找到。对啊，所以我等于是把中间这一块切起来放到前面去。Okay. Any question for our partial trace? Okay, we are very good on our progress. Okay, so that's basically all we want to talk about density matrix. So once again, there are three things we talk about in the reducing density matrix. So there is partial trace operation, there is purification, and there is streamy decomposition. And we see in very simple way how those concepts told you about entanglement between system A and system B. And there are more delicate ways to describe entanglement, and you can read them in I believe chapter 8 or 9 of Nielsen and Tron. It's quite interesting. And the entanglement is something people study a lot in quantum information theory. So it's not quite in the scope of this course, but it's a very interesting concept of quantum theories. And okay, so that's that. Then there is no question. Then let's go back to a little bit to something in the chapter 1 of the book, and it's block sphere and poly. So block sphere is a really specialized way to describe quantum state in one qubit. So they don't tell us anything new in quantum theory, but they are very useful picture to think about state in 1 qubit. So basically, what happens is you can describe a 1 qubit state as a point in a unit sphere. So let's just start from a derivation here. So we have a state in 1 qubit, and obviously it can be written as A0 plus B1 for some coefficient A and B. And the vector need to be normalized, so A squared plus B squared should equal to 1. Then we just do some complex number manipulation. So basically we write A and B in polar form. So A should be some EI theta, sorry, not theta, I should not say. It should be some phase times its length, and B should be some phase times some length. But we know the norm square of A and norm square of B some equal to 1, so we can say the norm of A is some cosine theta, cosine some theta over 2, and norm of B is some sine theta over 2. And then there is the face of A and the face of B. And let's say the face of A is this e to the I gamma, and the face of B is so the face of the B is e to the I gamma times another face e to the I phi. Okay. So obviously we can write A and B equal this. And what happens is we describe two complex number with 4 real number, right? So two complex number, two complex coefficient is described by 4 real coefficients, and we have 1, 2 here. It's a little weird, but there's an extra constraint, so actually 3 3 coefficient here. So 1, 2, 3, and then remember we said that the global phase of a quantum state doesn't really matter. So we omit this e to the I gamma thing. Then we are left with two parameters. So this theta and phi. And you can check yourself that this theta should have range from 0 to pi, and phi should have range from 0 to 2 pi. And so we can identify a state of A0 plus B1 with a pair of theta and phi, and we can draw the theta phi as a spherical coordinate on the sphere. So how do you find the point of theta and phi as a spherical coordinate is you start from this north pole of the axis, then you go down some angle theta on this xz plane. So I should draw here. So so this is how spherical coordinate works. So you first go down some angle theta here. Then you rotate on xz plane by some angle phi. So you can go here and go here. So this is the point that corresponds to theta and phi. Okay. So that's something. You can do the calculation and find the point on the sphere corresponding to your A0 plus B1. That's cool, but does this geometry actually told you something more? Okay, first you can see this is kind of one-to-one correspondence. So every theta and phi you can find corresponding A and B. And so this is one-to-one except that we are omitting the global phase. Okay, but there are actually more properties that make this mapping nice. So first thing is that the XYZ axis here, so this three-dimensional XYZ, actually corresponding to the poly matrices sigma X, sigma Y, sigma Z. In more sense, we will see later. So the first things we will see here is that those points on those axes, so say this plus x point and this minus x point, they are actually the eigenstate of sigma x. So this point will actually be the plus eigenstate of sigma x, that's the plus state. And this state will be the minus eigenstate of sigma x, that's the minus state. Also, this point will be the plus eigenstate of z, and this point will be the minus eigenstate of z. And similarly for y. And you can just check this formula, and that's true. I guess, do we have? No. Okay. Yeah, let's see the easiest calculation. So let's say this point, right? This point has theta equal to 0. So that's really just a 0 state. That's 0. And this point have theta equal to pi. Right? Theta equal to pi. And so cosine theta equal to 0 and sin theta equal to 1. So this is really 1. And as we say, the global phase is kind of arbitrary. So that's cool. The XYZ actually correspond to sigma X, sigma Y, sigma Z. And as we said, a point on the sphere, it has 1-to-1 correspondence to one quantum cubic state. But it's a modular some global phase. And this really just comes from the derivation we have here. And then there is something really cool. Is that mixed state will correspond to linear combination of pure state. And that's respecting the geometry on this sphere. So for example, this origin. So I should say the ensemble interpretation of mixed state just coincide with the geometrical interpretation here. So for example, this origin, if you think about average on the sphere, the original this origin, this 0 point, should be 1/2 of this plus point and 1/2 of this minus point, right? And it's also equal to 1/2 of this 0 and 1/2 of this 1. Okay. So that nicely correspond to the totally mixed state, okay, equal to 1/2 of identity. So that's really cool. And for all other points, so say you have 1/2 of this plus and 1/2 of this 0, then it will be correspond to a mixed state, something in the middle here. And more generally, you can derive that every state, every mix or pure state row on a sphere correspond to the density matrix 1/2 identity times A dot sigma. So here A is a three-dimensional vector, AX, AY, AZ. that's just the xyz coordinate on this space. And this sigma vector means sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. So let's write this out. Is 1/2 I plus ax sigma x plus ay sigma y plus az sigma z. That's what we mean. So this xyz correspondence is more than just on the axis. So actually, the whole sphere, the whole ball has this correspondence to sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, because every point in the ball can be correspond to this mixed state. That's just the coefficients will determine the sigma x, sigma y, sigma z correspondence. The weight of sigma x, sigma y, sigma z in the corresponding density matrix. So once again, let's see the original point. The origin point has coordinate 0, 0, 0, and that corresponding to the state. That's 1/2 identity. 1/2 identity. And we skip the proof here, but you can prove that this is unique. And also, I guess from here you can see this. What do I say? This mixture of density matrix will respect the geometrics mixture here, because when you average the coordinate, then obviously you also average the density matrix here. Right. So so there's a really nice correspondence. So any question yet? No. And so those are states, and that basically goes through the experience of quantum mechanics. So we talk about how states are represented on the ball. Then we talk about how unitary operations are doing on the ball. And this is also very nicely respecting the geometry. So when you do any unitary operation on this one qubit, will corresponding to some rotation, right? Some rotation on some axis. But once again, you are omitting global phase, so some phase data will be ignored. So for example, the sigma x operation, which map 0 to 1 and also plus y to minus y, is equal to a 180-degree rotation along this x-axis. Right? So it will kind of rotate. Is 0 to 1, 180 degrees, and then 1 to 0, 180 degrees. It will just rotate this ball. So that's also very cool. Unitary operation is a rotation. And so this representation of mixed state respect the geometry here, and the unitary operation also respect the geometry here. But then there is something bad that don't quite respect the geometry. That's the inner product. So the inner product on black sphere, or not quite same, is not same as the inner product between the quantum state. Or what I mean is also being orthogonal is not quite preserved. So remember we say the 0 state and the 1 state. So when we describe our quantum state in this two-dimensional basis, this 0 and the 1 are orthogonal to each other, right? But if you look at on the block sphere, remember this state is 0 and this state is 1. Actually, the same vector with just the -1 coefficient. And that's just a property of block sphere. You need to be careful. So the angles of the state in the original two-dimensional space is not the same as the angles of the corresponding point on block sphere. So be careful. And then we talk about a little physical interpretation. So why do people come up with this block sphere? Originally, because this block sphere is really can be seen as the spin direction of a particle of 2 dimensions. So that means, for example, if your system is in this 0 state, then it's really like you have a particle that's spinning in the up direction. So think about the Stern-Gerlach experiment that we talked about many classes ago. And those will correspond to this block sphere very nicely. So particle spinning up is like a state in the north pole of the block sphere. And let's say the particle is spinning in the x direction, then it corresponds to a state in this direct direction of block sphere, etc. And also, then in that sense, this unitary operation also being a rotation also make more sense, because as they apply sigma x, it's really like rotating your particle along the x-axis. Okay. And but we are not talking about physics, so that's something nice to know, but probably you won't in your homework or exam. But another nice thing to know about this is measurement. So there are measurements you do on 1 qubit. Well, obviously generalized measurement, there are a lot of measurements, but one particular kind of measurement you want to do corresponding to this very physical operation of measure your spin in some direction. So let's say you want to see your spin is in plus z direction or minus z direction or plus x direction or minus x direction. Well, actually, that will corresponding to measuring the z operator or x operator. And actually, this is really a 3D thing. So you can actually measure in arbitrary direction. This whole 2D sphere of direction you can measure in. And they can be written nicely in this linear combination of police. So if you want to measure in some n hat direction, so once again, this n hat is a unit vector in 3 dimensions. So this is some n hat x, n hat y, n hat z. Right. If you want to measure in this direction, then that's same as measure in n hat dot sigma. Sorry, measure this n hat dot sigma matrix or operator. This is a linear combination of Pauli matrices. So for example, your n hat is 0, 0, 1, then you are measuring sigma z. Okay, as we said. And this is a linear combination of Paulis, and I believe in your homework you will prove that this thing is a lot like Pauli that have eigenvalue +1 and -1. So for example, this is one of the one of the metrics we have been teaching about alongside with the police is this hidden operator. And it's really just square root 2 of x operator, sigma x, and the square root 2 plus sigma square. It's really square root 2 of x plus square root 2 of z. And you can see here, because it's square root 2, 1, 1, 1 minus 1. So this 1, 1 is sigma x, and this 1 minus 1 is sigma z. Okay. And that's really nice. So from this, we know that it has eigenvalues plus 1, and minus 1. And also you can kind of see the eigenstate here, because this has direction in 1 over square root x, 1 over square root z. So if we draw in our 3D thing, this x, y, z, then the hedema is pointing in this direction, right? This is 45 degree on xz plane, and it's measuring in this direction, and then its plus 1 eigenvalue will be this point on the sphere, and the minus 1 eigenvalue will be this point on the sphere. And that really correspond to, then you can look up this formula here to read out what are the eigenstate. So the plus 1 eigenvalue will have theta equal to 45 degree, and phi equal to 0. So it's this thing. So 45 degree is pi over 4, right? Let's say pi over 4. And so pi over 4 divided by 2 is pi over 8. And also then the minus 1 eigenvector will have, well, it's a similar thing, but there is a negative sign, and you can do a calculation. The theta should be equal. So essentially on the other side, so it will have, let's say, theta equal to essentially here, then rotate there. So yeah, my bad drawing. Okay. So theta will equal to 3 over 4 pi, and phi should equal to pi. And hopefully the calculation will show that this is a negative eigenstate. Okay, so any question on block sphere? It's a nice visualization of what happened in 1 qubit. And yeah, and give you more insight on those sigma x, sigma y, and sigma z. They actually correspond to physical 3-dimensional space a little bit. And if you study physics, there are some reasons why this works, but we won't go into detail. I guess also from quantum information perspective, an important thing to say that is that this block sphere picture really only works for 1 qubit. It's a very special thing that only works for 2-dimensional space. And people have been trying to generalize this to more dimension, but higher dimensional quantum space, this just we just don't find things with such nice property. The geometry is really weird. Okay, so it's really special. Question? Okay. Then be prepared for your homework, and we have extra time. Let's try to teach you a little more. Okay, so let's swap to totally different gear. Let's talk about computer science, classical computer science. And so this is kind of like a trial material. Let's do a little poll because it's fun. So how many people have heard about Turing machine? Please raise your hand. Yes, some? Okay, pretty cool. Okay, so that's. And how many of you didn't hear about Turing machine yet? Haven't heard about Turing machine? No people raised. So you actually all hear about Turing machine. Okay, so let's just go easy over this. As a pretty rough review of Turing machine. I don't think we actually use this concept in class, but it's nice to be a little complete. So Turing machine is a very theoretical construction of computers. They are what theorists think about computer. Actually, I think this is not quite true. Theorists think about circuit model a lot more. But if you want to be very fundamental, this is the most fundamental definition of a computer. Okay. And what they represent is really a Turing machine will represent one algorithm. It's one algorithm to do one kind of computation. And so Turing machine look like this. So there is your machine here, and it has some program says that if you see something, I will do something, and there is some memory that do finite state control, and there is a very important part, which is this read-write head. You can move along on this tape. So there is this infinitely long tape here that can have symbols on it, and you have a read-write tape head that can move slowly on this tape and will read and write on this tape. And let's see the so more formal definition has more parts, but I see really there are 4 essential parts here. So there is this tape and the read-write head and finite state control and the program, just describing this in reverse order. So tape is infinitely long tape. We say it's tape because Turing machine is thought about really long time ago, where people store things in mechanized tapes. I'm not sure how many of you actually see tapes. You probably never see tapes, or you see. Do you even see CD? You guys, when you grow up, you see CD. Okay. But anyway, it's some storage thing. Yeah, and well, it's a strip. It's really long, and you can chop it in block, and you can encode the 0 and the 1 on those blocks. But theoretically, the most important thing is it's infinitely long. You can store infinitely long number on it, and well, I say it can store 0 and 1, but for convenience, let's say you can also store blank. Yeah. And in terms of today's speaking, this is like a hard disk. Yeah. This is where you store most of your data, and but it's kind of weird. So it's interesting that it's a hard disk, but it's also your mouse and keyboard, because you also take your input from the tape when you try to execute your Turing machine. Okay. So this is where you will write your input on the tape, and the Turing machine will do something, and hopefully will write the output also on the tape. Okay. And then there's a read-write head. This is an important part of the Turing machine, but it's really mechanical. There's not too much theory here. It will, as we said, it can read on the tape. It can read where it's read. You write 0 to 1 or blank on the tape, and you can also move. And we have a very restricted movement set of this thing. Let's say you just move left or right one block every time. But I don't think it matters too much. Let's just make it very simple. So you can read or write, and you can read whatever on it, and you can write whatever on it, and you can move left or right on every clock cycle. And then there's finite state control. It's just it's like a memory of your computer. So this computing block thing, I think this is like your CPU or motherboard, and it has some internal memory you can write, and there will be some finite number that's enough to store all its programming steps you want to do. Okay. So there is some finite size memory here, and the finite here is compared to this infinitely long tape. Okay. So the finite just enough to hold your program. And then finally there is a program part, and we abstract it to just what the machine will do when he sees things. So what the machine's operation upon seeing its internal state and what it read on the tape. And there's really not much you can do. So here we only separate it into two things. The most important thing the machine should do is stop. Okay? So one of the most important the machine do is it will hold, it will stop, and presumably it will send out a signal say I stopped, and whatever user can now take a tape and read the output on the tape. Okay, so that's hold. And then there's other thing that basically do the computation. So so the other operations are right on the tape. So it will do all three of the things here. Okay, and that is you will write on tape, and you can change the internal state. So the internal state on this finite state control to anything he wants, and he can move the head left or right. Okay. So this is the program is whatever the program is list of things that says what the machine should do on every clock cycle. So every clock cycle, the machine will look at its program, and hopefully there is no conflict between it, but it will read its internal finite state and read what it is seeing on the head, and do one of the two things. So either hold or do all three of those, or write on tape, change the internal state, and move the head. So that's Turing machine. And well, we don't give an example here, but let's have some description here. So the first thing about Turing machine, the very cool thing is that it can simulate other computation, and this is really given as a thesis. This is what computer scientists believe, and well, we haven't really seen a counterexample until we see quantum computer. That is, Turing machine can simulate all computation model. So, for example, your laptop or smartphone, we think Turing machine can simulate them in reasonable time, which is on polynomial overhead. So maybe your computer has 1 TB hard drive, then a Turing machine with maybe 1 TB to the 10th power tape can simulate it. Something like that. But so you can simulate all reasonable computational model. So that's why we only need to think about Turing machine when we think about computer. But then this reasonable is weird because so what is reasonable? So first, what is reasonable? And second is when you have quantum computers, then these don't quite describe quantum computation. Okay? So that's weird. When you think about quantum computer, then you need to give a quantum Turing machine to make this simulation works. And so that's this is the purpose of a Turing machine. Then there are more characteristic about Turing machine. So first, there are computably infinite number of Turing machine because you can just count from our definition here. You can just count the Turing machine by how many finite state control states are there, and you can just count all possible programs in some order. So there are countably infinite number of them. So we can label them with a natural number, and that number is called Turing number. And finally, more about this simulation idea is something very cool called universal Turing machine. It can simulate all other Turing machine in this sense. So there is just one machine, universal Turing machine. And if you feed it with a special input, where your input is taken into 3 parts. So there is a star symbol, and there is the first part is the Turing number of the machine you want to simulate. Then you put a blank space. Then you put the input of whatever you want to calculate on this Turing machine. Then the universal Turing machine will hold if your Turing machine here hold, and if this Turing machine hold on this number, then your universal Turing machine will hold on this whole input, and will write all the computation of this Turing machine on this input. Okay. So yeah, and as we said, this Tn here is the Turing number of the Turing machine number m. Okay. So this is really cool. You have this universal Turing machine that's possible to do every computation in the universe. Whatever algorithm you want to run, you can put it as an input here on your infinitely long tape, and put the input on the later part, then you will have this. And so Turing machine can do basically all kinds of calculation and algorithm. Then people this series developed really long time ago, before we actually have computers. So the first thing people think about is, are there problems that cannot be computed by Turing machine? And yes, then that's a halting problem. People find out that there are undecidable problems that cannot be decided by any Turing machine. And we have 5 minutes left, so we don't have time to go over the proof, but we can describe the problem. So the problem is, does the so we want to decide whether some Turing machine X will hold on input Y. Okay. And because Turing machine, as we said, it will hold on some every Turing machine will hold on some where is it? Excuse me. It will hold on some finite state and head read pair. But if you feed it some input, but this might actually never get hit on some input. So when you run your Turing machine on some tape, there are always two possibilities that whether it hold at some point, or you will just run infinitely, just keep running around and do whatever. So the problem is, if you have a Turing machine that described by the Turing number X, and does it hold on some input Y, and you want to see whether there is a Turing machine that decides this. So you get X, Y as input to your Turing machine, and hopefully you want to decide whether this thing hold or looping forever. And people give a very kind of philosophical contradiction, showing that actually it's not possible to have a Turing machine do this, and which we will prove next time. So I guess we can stop early. This is some digression on fundamental of computer science. Okay, question? Otherwise we can stop early today. Okay, let's stop.